Greetings, Lore Masters. Tonight, our chronicle covers the quiet, forgotten tragedies scattered across the frozen expanse of the North. We aren't looking for world-eating dragons or Civil War generals this time. Instead, we are walking the unmarked paths, the snowy drifts, and the silent woods to find the stories that the map markers never tell you about. We are going to look at the scenes left behind when the music stops and the NPCs fade into the background. It is a tour of the aftermath, the little dioramas of death and sorrow that Bethesda tucked away for only the most observant wanderers to find. The wind is howling off the sea of ghosts, cutting through even the finest fur armour, and the sky is that perpetual heavy grey that promises nothing but more snow. It is the kind of weather that makes you want to stay inside a tavern, drinking mead and listening to a bard butcher Ragnar the Red for the 1000th time. But we have to go out there. We have to witness what remains. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a trip to Winterhold without some serious enchanted gear, or at least a relentless stockpile of cheese wheels to pause and eat in the middle of combat. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the algorithm find other weary travellers looking for a place to rest. Also, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is in your corner of the world. There is something comforting about knowing we are all scattered across the globe, sharing this same quiet moment. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our first stop takes us to the northernmost reaches of the province, where the land crumbles into the sea, and the air smells of ozone and ancient dust. The College of Winterhold stands like a defiant skeleton against the horizon, a testament to magic's endurance and its arrogance. Most who come here are looking to master the arcane arts, dreaming of throwing fireballs or summoning Atronachs from the plains of oblivion. But for some, that dream burns out, literally. If you leave the relative safety of the college courtyard and head roughly northwest following the jagged coastline where the ice floes grind against the rock, you might spot something strange against the endless white of the snow. It isn't a campfire exactly. It doesn't have the warm, inviting flicker of a hunter's hearth. It is a scorch mark, a circle of blackened earth that refuses to accept the snow. In the centre of this charnel circle lies a body, or what is left of one. This is Ysra. To the unobservant, she is just another corpse in a land filled with them, perhaps a victim of a dragon attack or a bandit raid. But the details tell a much more intimate, self-inflicted story. Ysra was an apprentice at the college, one of the students you hear about if you bother to speak to Finis Gesta. That is our core in-game fact for this location. Finis actually gives you a quest called The Missing Apprentices, asking you to track down 4 students who wandered off and never returned. He speaks of them with a detached sort of resignation, as if losing students to the elements is just a line item in the college's budget. He mentions that Ysra was trying to improve her fire spells, working on a modification to make them burn hotter, endure longer. Standing over her remains, it becomes painfully clear that she succeeded, but at a terrible cost. The snow around her is melted down to the bedrock, fused into obsidian glass by intense, localized heat. There are no enemies nearby, no arrows in her ribs, no slash marks on her robes. Beside her charred form lies a spell tome for Flame Cloak. It is a powerful spell, one that surrounds the caster in a wreath of magical fire to burn anyone who gets too close. It seems Ysra was trying to master this cloak, perhaps to impress the masters, perhaps just to keep warm in this miserable climate. There is a subtle, dark humour to it, in the way the universe tends to punish ambition in Skyrim. You can almost picture the moment. She's out here, away from the prying eyes of Tolfdir, maybe feeling a bit insecure about her abilities compared to the Dragonborn, who, let's face it, probably mastered this spell in 5 seconds after eating a book. She weaves the magicka, pulls the heat from the ether, and wraps it around herself like a blanket. But she pulls too much. The loop doesn't close. The fire doesn't just coat her, it consumes her. It's a flash of brilliance, a moment of perfect, blinding heat, and then silence. Just the hissing of steam as the snow tries to reclaim the scorched earth. This brings us to a rather obscure little detail that many miss. If you look closely at the loot table associated with Ysra, she's often found wearing a necklace. It's a simple piece of jewellery, likely something personal, a keepsake from a life before she came to this frozen wasteland to study magic. It survives the fire that turned her flesh to ash. It's a haunting reminder that she wasn't just a prop, she was a person with a history, a family, and an identity that was completely erased by one mispronounced syllable or one misplaced gesture. The game doesn't give us her journal, unlike some other tragic figures, so we are left to infer her final thoughts from the blackened circle she left behind. The community has discussed this particular unmarked location for years, and a popular fan theory suggests that Ysra's death wasn't entirely accidental, or rather, that it points to the gross negligence of the college itself. Players often debate whether the College of Winterhold is actually a school at all. There are no classes, no safety rails, and the faculty seems entirely unbothered when students wander off into the wilderness to test lethal magic alone. Ysra is often cited as Exhibit A in the argument that Archmage Savos Aren ran a terrible institution. In a modern university, this would be a massive lawsuit. In Skyrim, it's just Wednesday. It reinforces the idea that magic in the Elder Scrolls universe is dangerous, volatile, and barely contained, not just a gameplay mechanic where a blue bar goes down. As we stand there, watching the snowflakes hiss as they hit the still warm ground around Ysra, the loneliness of the north really sets in. She died alone, just a stone's throw from safety, consumed by the very thing she sought to control. The wind picks up, howling through the arches of the college in the distance, sounding almost like a mournful choir. We leave her there, a warning to all upcoming mages. Fire is a good servant, but a terrible master. The blackened scar on the earth will eventually be covered by the snow, buried like so many other secrets in this province. We turn away from the coast now, shaking the frost from our cloaks. The narrative pulls us south, away from the magical calamities of the learned, and toward the mundane, unlucky accidents of the common folk. We drift down through the mountain passes, leaving the permanent winter of the north for the greener, river-fed lands of Whiterun Hold. The transition is slow. The biting ice gives way to pine needles and wet mud. The sound of the ocean is replaced by the rushing of the White River. It is a deceptively peaceful landscape. The sun might be shining here, filtering through the trees in shafts of golden light. But don't let the beauty fool you. Death doesn't always come with a fireball or a Daedric war axe. Sometimes death is just a matter of bad luck. Sometimes the universe just decides it is your time, and there is absolutely nothing you can do to stop it. We are following the riverbank, the water churning white over the rocks. Mud crabs chitter and click in the shallows, snapping their pincers at passing dragonflies. It feels alive here, vibrant. But as we round a bend near the abandoned prison, but on the opposite bank we see a structure. It was a house once. Now it is a punchline to a joke no one is laughing at. This brings us to the sad, crushed abode of a man named Lorenz. There is something profoundly unfair about the scene before us. In a world where dragons shout fire from the sky and vampires stalk the night, you expect death to be dramatic. You expect it to have meaning, or at least a soundtrack. But here, on the southern bank of the White River, just across from the ominous stone walls of the abandoned prison, we find the ultimate cosmic prank. The structure is widely known among the community as Lucky Lorenz's shack, though calling it a shack now is generous. It is more of a pile of splintered wood and broken dreams. The visual storytelling here is immediate and brutal. A massive ancient pine tree, one that likely stood tall while the Empire was still young, has uprooted and fallen directly onto the roof of this small, solitary cabin. It didn't just clip the edge, it crushed the structure flat, driving the roof beams down into the floorboards. And underneath that wreckage, buried amidst the rubble of his own sanctuary, lies Lorenz. The game labels him Lucky Lorenz, a name that drips with the kind of irony Bethesda developers seem to enjoy a little too much. You have to wonder if he earned that nickname in life because he narrowly avoided death so many times, or if it was given to him posthumously by the locals as a grim joke. Let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer banality of this tragedy. Lorenz wasn't an adventurer. He wasn't wearing ebony armour or clutching a Daedric artifact. He was just a guy who wanted a quiet spot by the river. He found a beautiful location, listening to the rushing water, far away from the politics of the Civil War and the noise of the city. He built a home, and then gravity did the rest. It is a reminder that in Skyrim, physics is arguably the deadliest Daedric prince of them all. The engine that launches giants into the stratosphere is the same one that decided this tree's root system had failed. When we carefully pick through the wreckage, stepping over the shattered timber and the ruined furniture, we find Lorenz's skeleton. The positioning suggests he was sitting in a chair when the end came. He didn't see it coming, he didn't suffer. One moment he was there, the next he was part of the Foundation. But what makes this scene truly legendary in the lore community isn't just the death. It is what he was doing when he died. Lying right next to his skeletal hand is a copy of the lusty Argonian maid, V1. It paints a vivid, if slightly embarrassing picture of his final moments. Here was a man relaxing in his riverside retreat, perhaps with a glass of wine, indulging in Tamriel's most notorious piece of literature when the lights went out forever. It adds a layer of humanity to the skeleton. He wasn't a hero contemplating the fate of the world. He was just a bored Nord looking for entertainment. It's relatable. It's the Skyrim equivalent of scrolling through your phone in bed and dropping it on your face, only the phone is a 2-ton pine tree. There is a specific core in-game fact here that adds another layer to Lorenz's character. Amidst the ruin of his house, you can find a shrine of Dibella. This is a distinct religious object that grants a blessing of increased speechcraft and, notably, a damage bonus against the opposite sex. The presence of the shrine, combined with his choice of reading material, suggests that Lorenz was a devout follower of the goddess of beauty and love. He wasn't just reading smut, he was, in his own way, a pilgrim of passion. The shrine is still intact, sitting mockingly amidst the destruction, glowing with that faint divine purple light. It implies that, while Dibella might grant you charm, she certainly won't protect you from falling lumber. But let's dig deeper into the clutter, past the obvious jokes and the sad skeleton. There is an obscure lore tidbit hidden here that rewards only the most thorough scavengers. If you search the hollowed-out stump of the tree that killed him, or sometimes the small chest buried in the debris, depending on how the physics engine settled the wreckage when you loaded the cell, you can find Treasure Map 9. This is one of the rarest maps in the game simply because most players look at the crushed house, chuckle at the Argonian maid joke, and move on. The map depicts a location down in the rift, near the Riften masonry, where a chest is hidden. Think about the implication of that. Lorenz was sitting on a map that led to a fortune. He was lucky enough to possess a secret that could have made him rich. He had the map, he had the house, he had his book, he had everything figured out, and he never got to use any of it. The treasure is still out there, waiting for someone else to claim it, while Lorenz remains pinned to the riverbank. It reinforces the nihilistic streak that runs through the Elder Scrolls lore. Destiny is fickle, and wealth is meaningless if you don't look up once in a while to check for falling hazards. The fan community has had a field day with Lorenz over the years. A prevailing fan theory, debated in forum threads about the game's hidden details, questions whether this was truly an accident. Some loreheads argue that the placement of the tree is too perfect, too calculated. They speculate that perhaps Lorenz had offended a spriggan or a nature spirit. We know spriggans can manipulate vegetation. They can call upon the forest to attack intruders. Was Lorenz's house seen as an affront to the natural order? Did he cut down the wrong sapling to build his deck, inciting the wrath of the woods? Others take a more theological approach, suggesting that his reading material in the presence of a Dibella shrine was considered disrespectful, a cheapening of the divine portfolio of love, and the divines struck him down. But that seems unlikely. The Aedra are generally pretty hands-off. The most likely reality is the one that is hardest to accept. It was just random. It creates a sense of unease as we stand there. If lucky Lorenz can be crushed in his own home, what chance does the Dragonborn have? We spend our time worrying about Alduin eating the world, but we never worry about structural integrity. The ambient sound here is worth noting as we linger. The White River is loud. It roars over the rocks, creating a white noise that drowns out the birdsong. It's a peaceful, hypnotic sound, the kind that would lull you to sleep. It probably lulled Lorenz to sleep right before the crash. The contrast between the violence of the crushed wood and the eternal, uncaring flow of the river is sharp. The water doesn't care that Lorenz is dead. It just keeps flowing toward Windhelm, washing away the debris bit by bit. We leave Lorenz to his eternal rest, maybe taking the treasure map with us. After all, he's not using it. It feels like stealing. But then again, we are adventurers. We are essentially heavily armed grave robbers with a destiny complex. We step carefully over the logs, back onto the road, and continue our journey. The river guides us for a while, winding its way east, but we are going to diverge. We are heading toward the large inland body of water known as Lake Ilinalta. The air changes as we move away from the rushing river and toward the stagnant, misty atmosphere of the lake. Ilinalta is beautiful, reflecting the pine forests and the mountain peaks, but it has a dark reputation. The lake hides sunken forts and drowned ruins, and the mists that cling to its surface seem to stifle sound. We are looking for a spot on the western shore, hidden within a crag of rocks that most travellers bypass on their way to Falkreath. We aren't looking for an accident this time, we are looking for a crime scene. The vibe shifts from the dark comedy of Lorenz's shack to something much colder, much more sinister. There is no irony here, only brutality. As we push through the dense ferns and climb a small ridge, the smell of iron hits us before we see the bodies. It's the smell of old blood, rusted by the rain and the humidity of the lake. We have arrived at the Talos Shrine Massacre. The mist off Lake Ilinalta clings to everything, dampening the sound of your boots on the soft mossy earth. We are on the western side of the lake now, south of the Lady Stone, tucked away in the craggy foothills that separate Falkreath Hold from the expanse of the plains. It is a beautiful, melancholic spot. The trees are thick here, ancient pines that block out the weak sun, creating a permanent twilight. It is the perfect place to hide something, or someone. As we push through a dense thicket of ferns, the air changes. The smell of pine and lake water is abruptly replaced by the copper tang of spilled blood. It is a scent that never quite leaves the nostrils of a veteran adventurer, a primal alarm bell that says violence happened here. We step into a small, natural clearing, sheltered by a hanging rock face, and there it is, a shrine of Talos, the outlawed god of mankind. But this isn't a place of quiet contemplation anymore. It is a slaughterhouse. The scene is frozen in the aftermath of a desperate, chaotic struggle. At the base of the statue, where Talos stands with his sword raised, poised to strike down a serpent, lie the bodies of the faithful. There are usually 4 or 5 of them, dressed in simple farm clothes or light leather armour. These weren't soldiers. They weren't Stormcloak elites. They were just common Nords, perhaps a family or a small village congregation, who crept out into the woods to whisper prayers to a god the Empire says doesn't exist. They brought flowers, maybe a few coins as an offering. Instead, they paid with their lives. Lying amongst them, however, is a figure that changes the narrative entirely. He is draped in the terrifying hooded black robes of the Thalmor. His skin is the golden hue of the High Elves, now waxy and pale in death. This is a Justiciar, one of the elite enforcers of the Aldmeri Dominion, tasked with hunting down heresy across the Empire. Seeing one of them dead is usually a cause for celebration for most players. Let's be honest, nobody likes the Thalmor. They are the high school bullies of Tamriel, if the bullies could shoot lightning from their fingertips and wanted to unmake reality. But looking at this scene, the celebration dies in your throat. This core in-game fact hits hard. The white gold concordat wasn't just a piece of paper signed in the Imperial City, it was a death warrant for people like this. We hear about the Thalmor kidnapping people from NPCs like Delphine or the Greymanes, but here we see the raw result. The Justiciar didn't arrest them, he didn't read them their rights, he came here to purge. The positioning of the bodies tells a tragic story of a last stand. The worshippers are scattered, some face down as if running, others facing the elf. The Justiciar lies in the centre, overwhelmed. It implies that when the Thalmor agent stepped into the clearing, expecting cowed peasants to surrender, these Nords didn't kneel. They grabbed their iron daggers, their woodcutters' axes, and they swarmed him. They knew they were outmatched. They knew a simple farmer stands no chance against an Altmer battle mage trained in the Somerset Isles. But they fought anyway. They traded 4 lives for 1. It is a grim mathematical exchange, but in the context of the Resistance it counts as a victory. There is an obscure lore tidbit here that adds a layer of bureaucratic coldness to the violence. If you loot the body of the Justiciar, and you should because those robes fetch a good price, you will often find a document simply titled Justiciar Execution Order, or generic orders commanding the ferreting out of Talos worship. The text is always clinical, precise, and completely devoid of humanity. It treats these Nords not as enemy combatants, but as an infestation to be removed. It reminds us that to the Dominion, this wasn't a battle, it was pest control. The fact that the pests managed to kill the exterminator is a small, bitter irony that the game leaves for us to piece together. The community has long debated the identity of the worshippers here. A popular fan theory suggests that one of them wasn't just a farmer. The theory posits that for a group of civilians to take down a Thalmor Justicia, who possesses destruction magic capable of disintegrating a person, one of them must have had military training. Perhaps a retired legionnaire who returned home to find his god outlawed, or a former stormcloak who went into hiding. Players point to the presence of an iron war axe or a steel dagger found near one specific body, weapons that suggest a bit more martial intent than a simple hoe or pitchfork. Was there a protector among them, a hidden blade, or was it simply the sheer, frantic rage of people defending their right to believe? We may never know their names. The game labels them simply as Talos Worshipper. They are stripped of identity in death, becoming just another environmental storytelling asset. But the atmosphere in this clearing is heavy. The statue of Talos looks on, stone-face impassive. He didn't save them. He didn't send a bolt of lightning to strike the elf down. He just watched. It reinforces the silence of the gods in the Fourth Era. You can pray all you want, but when the fire spells start flying, you're on your own. As the sun begins to dip lower, casting long distorted shadows across the blood-stained grass, the chirping of crickets returns, indifferent to the carnage. The reality of the Civil War is often discussed in the Great Halls of Solitude or the Palaces of Windhelm, but this is where it actually happens, in the dirt, in the woods, in silence. We leave the bodies where they lie. There is no option to bury them, no button to pay respects. We simply turn our backs on the massacre and head north, climbing out of the green, suffocating woods of Falkreath and ascending toward the spine of the world. The temperature drops rapidly. The moss gives way to scrub grass, then to bare, rock, and finally to the eternal ice of the glaciers. We are heading toward the coastline again, but this time to the frozen wastes west of Winterhold, near the towering glaciers that carve into the Sea of Ghosts. The wind bites here, carrying shards of ice that sting the face. We are trekking toward a location that doesn't appear on your map until you are standing right on top of it. It is a place of hubris, a frozen monument to the idea that some doors should never be opened. High up on the ice shelf overlooking the freezing ocean, we find a perfect circle of stones. Inside, 3 bodies are arranged in a triangle. This is the Summoner's Folly. The climb up the glaciers is not for the faint of heart, or for those with low stamina bars. We leave the tragic, blood-soaked soil of the pine forest behind and ascend into a world of monochrome white. The wind here doesn't just blow, it screams. It carries the biting chill of the Sea of Ghosts, a cold so absolute that it feels like it's trying to freeze the very thoughts in your head. We're trekking along the jagged northern coastline, somewhere between the towering solitude of the Tower Stone and the shivering expanse of the Pilgrim's Trench. It is a part of the map that usually only sees traffic from hawkers and the occasional confused mud crab. But even here, in this frozen wasteland where survival should be the only priority, human ambition manages to leave a scar. We crest a ridge of blue ice, the snow crunching loudly under our boots, a sound like breaking glass, and we look down into a small, flattened depression on the glacier. It is a natural amphitheatre, shielded slightly from the wind, making it the perfect acoustic chamber for chanting, and there, stark against the pristine white snow, lies the Summoner's Folly. We find 3 skeletons. They aren't huddled together for warmth. They aren't lying in sleeping rolls. They're arranged in a precise equidistant triangle around a central focal point. The snow around them is scorched, blackened in a blast pattern that radiates outward, melting the ice into a slick, glassy bowl. In the centre of this triangle sits the object of their desire and the instrument of their destruction, a spell tome for Conjure Flame Atronach. Let's unpack the core in-game fact here. In Skyrim, conjuration is treated with a healthy amount of suspicion by the general populace, and looking at this scene, you can see why. Finis Gester at the college will tell you that conjuration is perfectly legal, but he also mutters about apprentices who try to pull things from oblivion that are too big for them to handle. This unmarked location is the visual proof of that warning. These 3 mages, whose names are lost to the ice, clearly decided that the safety regulations of the college were too stifling. They came out here, to the middle of nowhere, to perform a ritual without supervision. They formed a triangulation link, a common magical theory to stabilize a portal, and they pulled. The visual storytelling suggests a catastrophic failure of containment. When you summon a Daedra, you are essentially punching a hole in reality and dragging a sentient being made of fire and hatred through it. You have to bind it immediately, or it tends to express its displeasure by incinerating the nearest flammable objects. In this case, the nearest flammable objects were the summoners themselves. The blast pattern implies that the Atronach didn't just appear, it exploded into existence. It likely materialized, saw 3 shivering mages on a glacier, and detonated a wave of thermal energy before vanishing back to the Deadlands. Or perhaps it killed them, and then wandered off to melt some icebergs. There is a grim hilarity to the loot here. You, the player, walk up to the charred remains, step over the bones of these hubristic fools, and pick up the spell tome. You learn the spell instantly, Conjure Flame, Atronach added. It's the ultimate adventurer flex. What killed 3 people instantly becomes a simple tool in your arsenal, something you'll use to distract bandits while you loot a chest. It reinforces the gap between the Dragonborn and the rest of the world. For them, magic is a dangerous, life-ending gamble. For you, it's just R2 button. But let's look closer at the debris field. Scattered around the skeletons are the remnants of their preparation. You can often find alchemical ingredients, fire salts, soul gems, maybe a dagger. This leads us to an obscure lore tidbit that requires a bit of knowledge about the metaphysics of the Elder Scrolls. In the book The Doors of Oblivion, which can sometimes be found in random loot drops nearby or in mage dungeons, the author discusses the immense difficulty of maintaining a liminal bridge between Nirn and the Plains of Oblivion. The text mentions that the summoner must match the chaotic creatia of the Daedra with a stabilizing force on Nirn. Looking at the scene, we might spot a fatal error in their components. Did they use a lesser soul gem when they needed a common one? Did they try to substitute regular salt for fire salts because they were on a budget? The presence of specific low-tier ingredients near the bodies suggests that they were trying to perform a high-level summoning with discount materials. It's the magical equivalent of trying to fuel a jet engine with cooking oil. They cheaped out on the reagents, and the laws of physics collected the debt instantly. The community has a darker, more conspiratorial take on this scene. A prevalent fan theory connects these random, disastrous summonings to the Great Collapse of Winterhold. We know that 80 years prior to the game, a massive chunk of the city fell into the sea. The cause is officially unknown, though the locals blame the Mages' College. When we find sites like this, unmarked, uncontrolled magical explosions happening on the very glaciers that support the coastline, it lends credence to the idea that the mages are largely incompetent and dangerous. The theory suggests that the Great Collapse wasn't one singular event, but the cumulative result of hundreds of these small oops moments. If you have apprentices blowing holes in reality and melting the permafrost every other weekend, eventually the structural integrity of the land is going to give way. These 3 skeletons aren't just victims of their own stupidity. They are evidence of the systemic recklessness that plagues the magical community in Skyrim. They're chipping away at the world, one failed ritual at a time. The atmosphere up here is incredibly lonely. The wind howls over the blackened scorch mark, burying the bones in fresh powder. The heat of the explosion is long gone, replaced by the biting cold. There is no music here, just the ambient roar of the wind and the distant cracking of the ice shelf. It feels like the edge of the world. You can look out over the sea of ghosts and see nothing but grey water and fog. It makes you wonder what they were thinking in those final moments. Were they excited? Did they think they were about to achieve unlimited power? Or did they realise in that split second when the air turned to fire that they had made a terrible mistake? We leave the spell tome in our inventory, waste not, want not, and turn our backs on the charred trio. We have to descend now. We are leaving the high ice and the magic-scarred peaks, dropping down into the pale. The landscape shifts from white to a bruised purple and grey as the tundra struggles to assert itself. We are heading toward Dawnstar, the city of nightmares, but we aren't going into town. We are looking for a spot along the coast, just west of the sanctuary, where the snow meets the grassy plains. The vibe changes from the clinical high-stakes failure of magic to something much more intimate and heartbreaking. We are moving away from the pursuit of power and toward the pursuit of connection. Because even in Skyrim, amidst the dragons and the Draugr, people still try to find time for romance. They try to steal a few moments of happiness in a world that seems determined to crush it. We are looking for a small, inconspicuous tent set up near the shoreline. It looks peaceful from a distance, a perfect camping spot for a couple looking to watch the sunset over the ocean. But as we get closer, the silence feels heavy. The campfire has burned down to cold ash, the wine bottles are empty, and the occupants are not sleeping. We have arrived at the lovers' camp. We descend from the glaciers, leaving the biting wind of the high peaks for the damp, salty air of the northern coast. We're in the Pale now, a hold that feels perpetually exhausted, trapped between the nightmares of Dawnstar and the giants wandering the tundra. It's a harsh land, but beauty still clings to the edges. Wildflowers pushing through the frost, the aurora dancing overhead at night. We follow the shoreline west of Dawnstar, past the hawkers lounging on the ice floes, searching for a secluded spot tucked away from the road. It's the kind of place you'd choose if you wanted to disappear for a while, a small sheltered cove where the sound of the waves drowns out the worries of the war and the dragons. And sure enough, we find it. A small beige tent pitched on a patch of grass that has managed to survive the salt spray. 2 bedrolls are laid out side by side. A campfire, long since dead, sits in the centre of the camp. Beside it, 2 bottles of Alto wine and a scattering of red mountain flowers. This is the lovers' camp. At first glance, it looks like a serene vignette, a rare moment of peace in a game defined by conflict. The staging is deliberate. The flowers, the wine, the isolation. It screams romantic getaway. You can imagine them here, toasting to their future, watching the moons rise over the sea of ghosts, feeling safe in their hidden sanctuary. But as we step closer, the illusion shatters. The occupants of the tent are still here, but they aren't watching the sunset. 2 skeletons lie on the bedrolls. They aren't positioned in the chaotic sprawl of combat like the Talos worshippers, nor are they charred like Yizra. They are simply lying there, peaceful, side by side. Yet the cause of death is lurking just a few feet away, blending into the tall grass. Traps, bear traps. The entire perimeter of their little romantic haven is ringed with rusted, jagged steel jaws hidden in the underbrush. And not just bear traps. If you look closely at the surrounding rocks, you might spot the telltale shimmer of a tripwire or the pressure plate of a spike trap. This wasn't just a campsite, it was a killing ground. But who set the traps? This leads us to a core in-game fact. The random encounters in Skyrim are ruthless. We know that bandits, animals, and even Falmer roam these wilds. But the specific arrangement here suggests something more predatory. The traps are facing inward, or placed so close to the tent that stepping out for a midnight relieve yourself run would be lethal. However, the skeletons are intact, not mangled. This implies they didn't die from the traps. They died because of the traps. They were likely pinned down, trapped in their own shelter by something prowling outside. Or perhaps they were the ones who set the traps for protection and succumbed to the elements or starvation, too afraid to leave. Or, and this is the darker implication, they were murdered by whoever set the traps, and the bodies were left as a warning. But there's a distinct lack of looted goods. The wine is still there. The flowers are still there. If bandits did this, they were terrible at their job. This brings us to an obscure lore tidbit found in the game files, and occasionally hinted at in random bandit dialogue. There is a cut content quest, or at least a partially implemented world interaction, involving bandits who specifically target couples or travellers by setting up honeypot campsites. They lure people in with the promise of a safe rest, or they wait for campers to set up, then ring them with traps while they sleep. It's a terrifying thought. Waking up to the sound of metal snapping shut, realising you're fenced in, and then hearing the laughter from the dark. But let's look at the Romeo and Juliet angle the community loves to debate. A popular fan theory suggests these two weren't victims of bandits, but victims of their own families. Given the Civil War, many fans speculate this is a Stormcloak and Imperial situation, a forbidden romance between a Nord and perhaps an Imperial sympathiser or an elf. They fled to the coast to be together, away from the judgment of Windhelm or Solitude. The traps? Maybe they set them. Paranoia is a powerful drug. If you think the whole world is out to get you, you might surround your bed with steel jaws. The tragedy is in the ambiguity. Did they drink the wine and take poison together, deciding that death was better than being found? The presence of the empty bottles and the peaceful positioning of the skeletons strongly supports a suicide pact. They didn't want to live in a world that wouldn't let them be together. The flowers, red mountain flowers, which in alchemy have a damage health effect if eaten raw, though usually they restore health in potions. The symbolism of red for blood passion remains. Might be a subtle nod. Or perhaps they mixed a concoction. Standing there, the contrast is jarring. The ocean is beautiful, the flowers are vibrant against the snow, and these two people are just bones, their story lost to everyone but the seagulls. It's a quiet, intimate apocalypse. The world didn't end, but their world did. We leave the wine bottles where they are. It feels wrong to take them. We step carefully over the bear traps, because seriously, stepping on one of those takes a chunk out of your health bar and gives you a mild heart attack, and we back away from the campsite. We leave the lovers to their eternal date night. We turn southeast now, heading away from the coast and deep into the volcanic tundra of East March. The air grows warmer, heavy with the smell of sulphur and rotten eggs. The ground turns from white snow to yellow-brown scrub and steaming mud. We are entering the territory of the giants. Usually we give giants a wide berth. We've all been part of this Skyrim space program at least once, launched into orbit by a club because we got too close to a mammoth, but today we are looking for a giant who has no interest in fighting. We're trekking toward the mist-shrouded sulphur pool south of Windhelm. Through the steam, we see a silhouette. It's massive, slumped over, shoulders shaking. He isn't patrolling. He isn't herding. He is standing over a large, lifeless mound in the water. We have found the Mourning Giant. The transition from the frozen coast of the Pale to the volcanic flats of Eastmarch is one of the most drastic shifts in Skyrim. The biting cold is replaced by a humid, suffocating heat rising from the earth itself. Geysers erupt in rhythmic blasts of scalding water, and the ground is a patchwork of yellow sulphur, grey rock and hardy twisted roots. It is an alien landscape, prehistoric and raw. We are walking south of Windhelm now, navigating the treacherous paths between the hot springs where hunters often strip down to relax. A stark contrast to the scene we are about to witness. We are looking for a specific spot, slightly off the main road that leads to Riften. Through the haze of steam and the shimmering heat distortion, we spot a giant. Usually seeing a giant this close triggers a fight or flight response. You instinctively reach for your bow or check your sprint stamina. But this giant doesn't react to us. He doesn't pound his chest or raise his club in warning. He's standing knee-deep in a sulphur pool, his massive frame slumped forward in a posture of utter defeat. As we creep closer, still keeping a respectful distance, because a sad giant is still a giant, we see what holds his attention. Lying halfway submerged in the hot water is a mammoth. It isn't sleeping. The stillness is absolute. This is the Mourning Giant. The core in-game fact here is simple but impactful. Giants and mammoths share a symbiotic bond that goes beyond simple husbandry. You see it in their behaviour. Giants protect mammoths with their lives, mammoths provide milk, for that cheese we all steal, and companionship. The game mechanics reflect this. Attack a mammoth, and every giant in the zip code aggroes onto you. But here, the mechanic is stripped away to reveal the emotional core. The mammoth is dead, likely from natural causes, or perhaps the intense heat of the springs finally took its toll on the shaggy beast. The giant isn't looting it. He isn't butchering it for meat. He's just staring. Sometimes, if you watch long enough, the idle animation of the giant changes. He might shift his weight, or let out a low, rumbling groan that vibrates in your chest. It's a sound of pure grief, transcending language barriers. It reminds us that these monsters, which we often farm for toes to level up our alchemy, have complex emotional lives. They aren't just high-level mobs, they are sentient beings capable of love and loss. There is an obscure lore tidbit that adds depth to this scene, found in the book The Primitive Rituals of the Giants, often shortened or referenced in developer notes. It suggests that giants have specific burial rites for their mammoths. They don't just leave them to rot, they cover them with stones, or sometimes tusks are arranged in patterns. Here, in the hot springs, the giant seems paralysed, unable to begin the ritual. Perhaps the ground is too soft to build a cairn, or perhaps he's simply too heartbroken to say goodbye. The water preserves the body, keeping it warm, creating a heartbreaking illusion of life. The community has rallied around this specific giant more than almost any other non-unique NPC. A popular fan theory, or perhaps a self-imposed rule among role players, is that this giant is sacred. While players will happily slaughter entire camps for loot, many have a strict do not engage policy for the Mourning Giant. Killing him feels like a war crime. It feels unnecessarily cruel to end his life while he's in the middle of a funeral. Some fans speculate on how the mammoth died. There are no arrows in it, no bite marks from dragons. Did it slip and drown? Did it succumb to the sulfur fumes? Or is it simply old age? The idea of a mammoth dying of old age implies a long history between these two. They might have walked the tundra together for 50 years. The giant is losing his lifelong companion, his pet, his source of livelihood, and his best friend all at once. The visual framing is masterful. The steam rising around them creates a natural veil, isolating them from the rest of the world. The sky in Eastmarch is often a bruised purple or orange, adding to the sombre atmosphere. It's a painting of sorrow. It forces the player to stop and reflect on the violence we bring to this world. How many times have we orphaned a mammoth or widowed a giant just to fill a soul gem? We watch him for a moment longer. The giant reaches out a hand, almost touching the mammoth's fur, then pulls back. It's a hesitant human gesture. We decide to leave him be. We don't need his toe that badly. We back away slowly, ensuring we don't snap a twig and disturb his vigil. We leave the heat of the volcanic tundra behind, moving west now, crossing the central plains and heading into the jagged vertical landscape of the Reach. The air cools and dries, the ground turns to hard granite and juniper berries. We are entering the land of the Forsworn, a place of steep cliffs and rushing waterfalls. We are heading specifically to Bard's Leap Summit. It's a massive, terrifying overhang that juts out over a deep pool of water. It is a place for daredevils, for players who want to test the limits of fall damage. But we aren't the first ones to stand on this precipice. Someone else was here before us, someone who jumped but never landed. We climb the wooden scaffolding, fighting our way past forsworn briar hearts and hags, until we reach the very edge of the stone platform. We look down. It's a long way, and if we wait, if we listen closely to the wind whistling through the canyon, we might just meet the ghost of the man who gave this place its name. We have arrived at the Cliffside Plunge. Leaving the humid, sulphur-choked air of the Eastmarch Flats, we turn our gaze westward, climbing into the most jagged and vertical terrain Skyrim has to offer. The Reach. This is a land of steep limestone cliffs, rushing waterfalls, and twisted juniper trees clinging to the rock face for dear life. It is a beautiful region, but it is also hostile. The Reachmen, the Forsworn, control these hills, decorating their camps with deer skulls and human ribs as if they were shopping at a macabre version of IKEA. The path is treacherous, winding up through the mist, forcing us to fight for every foot of elevation. We are heading to a place that calls to the impulsive idiot living inside every gamer's brain. You know that voice. The one that stands on a high ledge and whispers, "I bet I can make that jump." We are ascending through the Lost Valley Redoubt, a massive, sprawling ruin teeming with hagravens and briarhearts. We fight our way up the stone stairs, past the sacrificial altars where hearts are swapped out like bad carburetors, until we reach the very top. We step out onto a wooden plank that juts out over a terrifying drop. This is Bard's Leap Summit. Below us lies a deep turquoise pool, fed by a waterfall that roars in our ears. The distance is dizzying. If this were the real world, the surface tension of the water from this height would hit you like concrete. But this is Skyrim, and the laws of physics are more like guidelines. The visual language here is undeniable. It's a diving board. It demands that you jump. So we take a breath, sprint, and launch ourselves into the void. The wind rushes past, the stomach drops, and for a few seconds we're flying. Then, the splash. We surface, gasping, shaking the water from our eyes, checking our health bar. We survived. We swim to the wooden ramp at the water's edge, feeling that rush of adrenaline. But as we pull ourselves onto the dry planks, we realise we aren't alone. Sitting there, shimmering with a spectral blue light, is a man. He holds a lute. He isn't hostile. He isn't a Draugr. He is Azadal, the ghost of the bard who didn't make the jump. This is our core in-game fact. Bard's Leap Summit is a scripted event that rewards the player for their bravery, or stupidity. If you survive the fall, Azadal appears to congratulate you. He plays a short, melancholy tune on his lute and tells you, with a mix of awe and jealousy, that he has been waiting a long time to see someone actually pull that off. He admits that he tried it himself once. He wanted to perform the leap to inspire a great song, a ballad that would make him famous across the holds. Instead, he slipped, or he miscalculated, or perhaps he just flailed on the way down. He hit the water wrong, and that was it. The song ended before it began. The interaction is brief. He raises your speech skill by 2 points, a gift from one performer to another, and then he fades away, leaving you alone with the sound of the waterfall. It's a haunting little vignette. Most players treat it as a cool Easter egg, a free skill boost. But when you really think about it, it's a tragedy of wasted potential. Azadal died for clout. He died trying to create content. In a way, he is the patron saint of every YouTuber who has ever injured themselves doing a stunt for views. Let's dig into the obscure lore tidbit here. If you scour the game files or pay very close attention to his dialogue, Azadal isn't just a random bard. His name sounds Redguard, implying he travelled a long way to find his muse in these dangerous mountains. But more interestingly, there is no body. We found Lorenz crushed under his tree. We found Yizra charred on the ice. But Azadal, there are no bones at the bottom of the pool, no floating corpse. This suggests that the water, or the things living in it, claimed him completely. Or perhaps the Forsworn who infest the area fished him out and used him for their dark rituals. The fact that his ghost is tethered here, forced to replay his failure eternally until someone succeeds, implies a specific kind of curse. He wasn't allowed to move on until he saw the feat completed. You didn't just entertain him, you set him free. The community has spun some fascinating theories about Azadal and the summit. One popular fan theory debates whether Azadal actually jumped of his own free will. Look at the location. The Lost Valley Redoubt is a fortress of the Forsworn, specifically the Hagravens who worship Hircine and other darker powers. Would a lone bard really be able to hike all the way to the top of this heavily guarded ruin just to jump off a plank? It seems unlikely he could sneak past an army of Briarhearts. The theory suggests that Azadal was a prisoner. The leap wasn't a stunt, it was an execution method, or perhaps a trial by ordeal. Maybe the Forsworn forced him onto the plank and told him, if you survive the fall, you go free. He played his lute, sang his last song, and took the plunge hoping for freedom, only to have his neck snapped on impact. His ghost claiming he attempted the jump for a song might be his spirit coping with the trauma, rewriting his own violent death as a misunderstood artistic endeavour. It makes the scene infinitely darker. You aren't recreating a stunt, you're surviving an execution. The atmosphere at the bottom of the falls is hypnotic. The roar of the water creates a white noise that blocks out the screeches of the Hagravens above. It's a secluded, damp sanctuary. The mist rises off the pool, cooling the air. After the ghost fades, there is a profound sense of emptiness. He waited decades, maybe centuries, just for this one moment of validation. And now, he's gone. The plank above is empty. The water is still. We take a moment to dry off, maybe looting the chest that sits nearby, and then we begin the long trek out of the valley. The reach is beautiful, but it has too many eyes, too many ghosts. We need to get back to the open tundra. We need to get away from the vertical drops and the sharp rocks. We head southeast, descending from the mountains back toward the border of Whiterun Hold and the Rift. The land flattens out. The juniper trees give way to the familiar pines and birches. We are near the throat of the world now, south of the playful chaos of the throat of the world, near a location called Miko's Shack. But we aren't going to the shack just yet. We are looking for the story inside the shack. We are looking for a small wooden cabin that sits quietly near the road. It looks inviting. There's a dog barking outside, a dog that seems desperate for attention. He runs to us, barks, runs back to the shack and looks back. It's the universal sign for Timmy is in the well. We follow the dog, we enter the shack, and we find one of the most emotionally damaging scenes in the entire game. We aren't dealing with ghosts or explosions this time, we are dealing with loyalty. We have arrived at the home of the faithful dog. We drift away from the vertical vertigo of the reach, leaving the waterfalls and the ghosts of failed bards behind us. We move northeastward now, entering the dense, foggy pine forests of Yulmarch. This is a region defined by its gloom, the swampy marshes of Morthal to the east, the rocky highlands of Solitude to the north. The air here is damp and smells of wet fur and decaying leaves. It is a quiet part of the map, often traversed but rarely explored, a transitional space where the trees seem to lean in. whispering secrets to one another. We're walking along the road that connects Dragon Bridge to Morthal, just minding our own business, perhaps keeping an eye out for frostbite spiders when we hear it. A bark, distinct, sharp, and persistent. In Skyrim, the sound of a wolf usually means you're about to be attacked. You draw your weapon, spin around, and prepare to block. But this isn't a wolf. Standing by the side of the road, looking agitated and desperate, is a shaggy grey wolfhound. The game labels him simply as Miko. He doesn't attack. He barks at you, runs a few paces into the woods, stops, looks back, and barks again. It is the universal language of canines transcending all barriers. Follow me. Something is wrong. We follow him. We have to. It's hard-coded into our human DNA to follow the distressed dog. He leads us off the main road through the underbrush to a small dilapidated cabin known as Miko's shack. The roof is full of holes, the wood is rotting, and the door hangs loosely on its hinges. It is the home of someone who had very little to lose. Miko runs inside and stands next to the bed, whining softly. And there, lying on the messy furs, is his owner, a gnawed man, dead. There are no wounds, no arrows, no signs of a struggle, just a man who went to sleep and didn't wake up. This brings us to the core in-game fact, the one that has made grown gamers weep into their keyboards. On the bedside table, next to the cold corpse, is a journal. It is short, poorly written, and absolutely devastating. The man writes about his life in the woods, his struggle to survive, and his declining health. He mentions a condition called rock joint, but the final entry is what breaks you. He writes, "I don't think I'm going to make it. I just hope Miko will be alright. He's a good boy." That line, "he's a good boy," hangs in the air like a shout. It instantly transforms this generic NPC corpse into a tragic figure of empathy. He wasn't worried about his soul, or his possessions, or the war. His final thought, his final anxiety as the light faded from his eyes, was for the welfare of his dog. And the dog, loyal to the end, is still here. Miko hasn't run off to join a pack of wolves. He hasn't eaten the corpse, which, let's be honest, real dogs might do. He's just waiting for his master to wake up. Let's look at the obscure lore tidbit hidden in the medical diagnosis. The owner died of rock joint. In the gameplay loop of Skyrim, rock joint is a minor annoyance. You contract it from a wolf bite or a trap, and it gives you a 25% penalty to melee weapon damage. You fix it by chugging a cheap cure disease potion or praying at a shrine. It takes 5 seconds. But in the lore, in the reality of Tamriel for a commoner, rock joint is a terrifying degenerative condition. The name implies a calcification of the joints, similar to severe arthritis, or perhaps something like fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, where muscle turns to bone. Without magical healing or alchemy, which are expensive and rare for a hermit living in a shack, it is a slow, agonizing sentence. The man likely lost his ability to hunt, then his ability to chop wood, and finally his ability to move. He slowly froze into a statue of pain within his own body. It highlights the massive disparity between the Dragonborn, who is essentially a walking god of health, and the average citizen who can die from a bad wolf bite because they can't afford a 50 septim potion. The community has an intense attachment to Miko. A prevailing fan theory and subsequent debate revolves around the moral obligation of the player. Miko is one of the few non-human followers in the game who isn't a summoned creature. The community generally agrees that leaving Miko at the shack is the bad ending. If you walk away, the game script leaves him there, indefinitely, barking at a corpse. It is a purgatory of loyalty. Therefore, many players consider adopting Miko to be a mandatory part of a playthrough. However, this leads to another tragic realization discussed in forums. Miko is not essential. He can die. If you take him on your adventures to save him from loneliness, you are exposing him to dragonfire, Falmer poisons, and bandit warhammers. Countless players have reloaded saves from hours ago just because Miko got caught in the blast radius of a fireball. The tragedy of Miko is a choice. Do you leave him safe but heartbroken in the shack, or do you take him on a glorious adventure that will almost certainly get him killed? There is also a theory that the owner was hiding from something. Why live so close to Solitude, the capital, yet die of a treatable disease? Some speculate he was a deserter from the Legion, or a criminal lying low. If he went into the city for a healer, the guards might have recognized him. He chose death over prison. He chose freedom with his dog over a cell in the Dur Castle dungeon. It adds a layer of stoic stubbornness to the sad scene. The atmosphere inside the shack is stifling. The wind whistles through the gaps in the planks. The fire is long dead. The only sound is the rhythmic, anxious panting of the dog. It's a small, intimate space of grief. Unlike the grand tragedy of the Talos Massacre or the magical hubris of the Summoner's Folly, this is quiet. It's the death of a nobody, mourned by a creature that doesn't understand the concept of death, only absence. We make our choice. Maybe we tell Miko to follow us. Maybe we leave him there. But either way, we have to move on. We step out of the shack, the gloom of the Jarlmarch forest pressing in on us. We head north again, pushing all the way to the coast, and then we swim, or find a boat, to the frozen archipelago of Winterhold. We are returning to the ice, but we aren't going to the college this time. We are going further north, past the mainland, to a small nondescript island floating in the Sea of Ghosts. It looks like a jagged chunk of ice, unremarkable from a distance. But as we draw closer, we see the frost-rimed bars of a cage. We see the frost Atronax patrolling the perimeter. We are heading to the Chill. It is a location most players only see if they get arrested in Winterhold, but it is a story of cruelty all on its own. It is a prison with no walls, only the lethal cold. We enter the damp, freezing cave system used to hold the unwanted. We are looking for the hidden prison. We leave the heartbreak of Miko's shack behind, stepping out of the gloom of the pine forest and back into the biting wind of the northern coast. We have seen fire, we have seen gravity, and we have seen loyalty. But now we must face the cold in its most weaponized form. We are heading due north, past the ruins of Winterhold, past the college, and straight into the churning black waters of the Sea of Ghosts. Most adventurers avoid swimming in these waters. The game mechanics are forgiving. You don't die of hypothermia in the vanilla game, though survival mode changes that fast. But the psychological effect of the grey water and the floating icebergs is enough to keep most people on dry land. We, however, are swimming. We are heading for a small, jagged island that sits isolated in the mist, disconnected from the mainland and erased from most civil maps. It looks like just another glaciated rock, a place for hawkers to sunbathe. But as we pull ourselves onto the slick ice, we see the entrance. It isn't a door, it is a moor in the ice, rimmed with frost that never melts. This is the Chill. To the casual explorer who plays a law-abiding citizen, this location is a mystery. You might stumble upon it while chasing a quest marker or hunting for elusive sea ghosts, enter the cave, and find yourself immediately pummeled by high-level enemies. But for the criminals of the server, the sweet-roll thieves and the chicken killers, this place is legendary. This is Winterhold's answer to a dungeon. The core in-game fact here is terrifying in its implications. The Chill is the official jail for the hold of Winterhold. In Whiterun, if you break the law, you sit in a damp cell under the castle, maybe look for a loose brick to pick the lock. In Riften, you rot in a stone room. But in Winterhold, a city that has fallen into the ocean and barely has enough gold to fix a fence, they don't have the infrastructure for a stone prison. Instead, they row you out to a glacier, throw you in a cave made entirely of ice, and leave you there. The guards here aren't bored Nords complaining about their knees. They are frost Atronax. Let that sink in. The Jarl of Winterhold utilises summoned Daedra from the elemental planes of oblivion to act as wardens. When you enter the cave, the air is so cold it hurts your lungs. The walls are translucent blue ice. There are crude cages carved directly into the glacier, barred with rusted iron that looks brittle enough to snap. Inside these cages, you find the remains of those who served their sentences a little too long. Skeletons huddled in the fetal position, stripped of their flesh not by rot, but by the desiccating freeze. If you choose to serve your time here via the game menu, you don't just wake up outside the prison gates like in other cities. You spawn outside the cave on the island amidst the blizzard. You have to swim back to civilization. It is a punishment that goes beyond incarceration. It is a survival trial. It suggests that in the eyes of Winterhold's law, if you survive the swim back, the gods have judged you worthy of a second chance. If you drown or freeze, well, that's just justice. Let's examine the obscure lore tidbit that the environment whispers to us. Who summons the Atronax? We know that Winterhold is deeply suspicious of magic. The locals hate the college. The Jarl, Coria, spends half his dialogue ranting about how the mages destroyed his city, and yet his prison is guarded by high-level conjuration magic. This implies a deep systemic hypocrisy. If you dig around the game files and look at the faction data for the Frost Atronachs inside the Chill, they are technically part of the Winterhold Guard faction. This means someone on the Jarl's payroll is casting these spells. Is it Malur Seloth, the Dunmercourt wizard who claims he barely knows any magic and is just lazy? His laziness might be a front. Summoning permanent unbound Frost Atronachs to patrol a cave requires significant magical power, arguably more than most college apprentices possess. It suggests that the Jarl's court is using the very thing they publicly despise to enforce their rule. They are using fire to fight fire, or in this case, ice to fight crime. The loot inside the cave adds another layer to the story. Scattered among the frozen bones are scraps of clothing, rags mostly. But occasionally you find a shiv. It's a standard prison weapon, but its presence here is futile. Who are you going to stab? The giant golem made of solid ice? The prisoner in the next cage who is already a popsicle? The shiv represents the last desperate hope of a human mind trying to assert control in an environment that is fundamentally alien. It's a tool for a riot that never happened because everyone froze to death before they could start it. The community has long debated the ethics of the Chill compared to other prisons in Tamriel. A popular fan theory posits that the Chill is actually a black site used for disposing of mages. Given the animosity between the town and the college, fans speculate that when a mage steps out of line in town, they aren't just fined. They are sent here because the cold dampens magicka regeneration, a mechanic seen in survival mods and previous Elder Scrolls games, though less explicit in vanilla Skyrim stats. The ice acts as a dampener. Furthermore, some lore hunters argue that the Chill predates the current city. The architecture of the cages, what little there is, looks ancient. Was this originally a tomb? A pantry for frost giants? Or perhaps a testing ground for cryomancers? The fact that the city repurposed it as a jail speaks to the desperation of Winterhold. They are living in the ruins of a golden age, using a haunted freezer as a municipal service because they can't afford to build a room with 4 walls and a door. The atmosphere inside is oppressive. The soundscape is dominated by the heavy, crunching footsteps of the Atronachs and the howling wind at the cave mouth. The light is a diffuse, unearthly blue that makes everything look dead. It's a place where time stops. Preservation is the theme here. The bodies don't rot, the ice doesn't melt, and the hatred for the criminals is frozen in perpetuity. Standing in the back of the cave, looking at a skeleton whose hand is reaching through the bars toward a potion he couldn't reach, you realise that this is the cruelest place in Skyrim. Cidhna Mine has the forsworn conspiracy, but at least it has fire. The Chill has nothing but the void. It is the ultimate expression of the indifference of the North. We leave the Atronachs to their patrol. We step back out into the blizzard, shivering even through our armour. We have to swim back, the water is black and freezing, and the slaughterfish are nipping at our boots. But the physical pain of the swim is better than the numb horror of that cave. We make it back to the mainland, gasping and wet, and we need to warm up. We need to get away from the ice. The narrative pulls us south and west, seeking the relative civilization of Harfingar. We are heading toward the Dragon Bridge area, where the roads are paved and the Imperial presence is strong. It feels safer here. The patrols are frequent, the architecture is solid. But safety is an illusion in Skyrim. Just because the road is paved doesn't mean it's secure. We are following the road south of Dragon Bridge, heading toward the majestic stone arches that give the town its name. We are looking for a spot near the river, where a caravan failed to make its delivery. Usually a destroyed caravan means bandits, maybe a giant. But as we approach this specific wreck, the clues don't add up. The arrows sticking out of the wood aren't iron or steel. They are chitin, and the bodies are gone. We have arrived at the Falmer Ambush. The transition from the frozen, magical isolation of Winterhold to the paved, patrolled roads of Harfingar is jarring. We have swum through the freezing black water, climbed the rocky shores, and now we find ourselves walking on solid Imperial stone. The Dragon Bridge arch looms in the distance, a marvel of engineering that has stood for eras. The hold of Harfingar, home to Solitude and the High King, likes to present itself as the bastion of civilization. Here, the Legion patrols regularly. Here, the laws are enforced. Here, you're supposed to be safe. But as we walk south from the bridge, following the winding road that hugs the cliffs overlooking the Karth River, we realise that safety is just a story the Empire tells itself to sleep at night. The sun is setting, casting long golden shadows across the road, turning the pine trees into jagged silhouettes. The air is crisp and smells of pine resin and river mud. It is a quintessential Skyrim evening, beautiful and serene, until we smell the rot. It isn't the stale, dry smell of the Draugr tombs. It isn't the metallic tang of fresh bandit violence. It is a musky insectoid scent, like crushed beetles and damp fungus. We round a bend in the road, just out of sight of the bridge patrols, and we find the wreckage. It was a caravan, a simple merchant cart, likely heading from Solitude to Markarth with a shipment of wine or iron ingots. Now it is kindling. The cart has been violently overturned, its wheels shattered not by the impact of the crash, but by something that hacked through the spokes. The horse lies dead in the traces, but this isn't the work of wolves or saber cats. The horse hasn't been eaten, it has been punctured. Sticking out of the horse's flank and embedded deep in the wood of the cart are arrows, but they aren't the iron-tipped shafts of the bandits, nor the steel of the Legion. They are made of a dark, glossy material that looks almost organic. They are fashioned from the chitin of the Chorus. We have stumbled upon the aftermath of a Falmer surface raid. This brings us to a terrifying core in-game fact. The Falmer are not just a dungeon mechanic. While most players associate the blind, twisted elves with deep Dwemer ruins and the glowing caverns of Blackreach, the game world explicitly shows us that they are testing the boundaries of the surface. Mechanics-wise, you will occasionally encounter Falmer scouting parties at night in high-level areas, but this static, unmarked environmental storytelling is far more chilling. It proves that they don't just wander up by accident. They are hunting. They're conducting organised, targeted strikes against the surface dwellers, striking fast and dragging their victims back into the dark before the sun rises. The scene before us is a masterclass in absent storytelling. There are no human bodies. If this were a bandit attack, the driver would be dead in the dirt, stripped of his gold. If it were a dragon, there would be ash. But here, the driver and the guards are simply gone. The lack of corpses implies a fate much worse than death. It implies capture. We know from exploring places like Blackreach or the Tolval's cave system that the Falmer take slaves. They drag surface dwellers down into the deep, blinding them, torturing them, and turning them into the twisted, soulless husks known as Falmer servants. The driver of this cart isn't dead. He's currently being dragged through a damp tunnel, wondering why the lights went out. Let's examine an obscure lore tidbit found in the design of the wreckage. If you look closely at the ground near the cart, you might spot a lingering, glowing residue. This is a subtle nod to the poisons the Falmer use. The Falmer are master alchemists, particularly with toxins derived from the Chorus and the glowing mushrooms of the deep. There is a book in the game, The Falmer, a study, written by the scholar Ursa Euthrax, which is often found in areas like this. In it, she theorises that the Falmer are not just savage beasts, but a devolving culture that is paradoxically evolving new methods of war. She notes that their raids are becoming more frequent and more organised. The residue on the ground suggests they used a paralytic agent, something to incapacitate the merchants instantly, so they could be taken alive without a struggle. It changes the scene from a fight to a harvest. The community has spent years debating the implications of scenes like this. A popular fan theory, often referred to as the Falmer Uprising or the Reclamation, suggests that the Civil War and the return of the dragons are merely distractions from the actual apocalypse. While the Stormcloaks and Imperials bleed each other dry over Talos worship, and while the Dragonborn chases lizards in the sky, the Falmer are breeding. They breed faster than Nords or Elves. They are stronger, they are immune to the cold, and they know the subterranean geography better than anyone. The theory posits that the Falmer are preparing for a massive coordinated invasion of the surface world. These overturned caravans aren't random acts of violence, they are supply runs. They are stealing metal, weapons and people to fuel a war machine that is gathering strength just beneath the floorboards of Skyrim cities. Some players point to the sheer number of Falmer in the game, thousands of them compared to the relatively sparse population of Hold Guards, as evidence that if the Falmer ever decided to rush the surface en masse, Skyrim would fall in a week. Standing by the wrecked cart, the sun finally dips below the horizon and the shadows lengthen. The psychological effect of this unmarked location is potent. It makes you look at the ground differently. You realise that the road you're walking on is just a thin crust over a vast hostile world. We usually look up for danger in Skyrim, scanning the skies for dragon wings, but this scene reminds us that we should be looking down. The danger is under our feet. The silence here is heavy. The usual chirping of crickets feels muted, as if the local wildlife knows that a predator was here. A predator that doesn't belong in the natural order. We step away from the cart, leaving the Chaurus arrows where they are. We don't want to touch them. The lingering poison might still be active. We need to follow the trail. The narrative pulls us away from the road, following the drag tracks that disappear into the rocky foothills. We are moving from the implication of the horror to the source of it. We are heading towards a cave entrance that isn't marked on your map until you are breathing the stale air of its mouth. We are going to find out what happens to the things the Falmer and their darker allies drag away. We're travelling west now, deep into the reach of the Druidak Mountains, to a cave system that serves as a feasting hall. We aren't just looking for elves this time. We are looking for the creatures that the elves worship and serve. We are entering a place where the walls are alive with the clicking of 1,000 legs. We're going to the insect's feast. We leave the wreckage of the caravan behind, the image of those chitin arrows stuck in the dead horse burning a hole in our memory. The tracks of the dragged merchants lead us away from the safety of the Dragonbridge Road and into the jagged, craggy wilderness of the Reach. The landscape here is aggressive. Sharp limestone ridges, thorny briars and deep ravines that seem to swallow the light. We are following a trail of blood and disturbed earth that leads us to the mouth of a cave hidden behind a curtain of hanging moss. This isn't a glorious Dwemer ruin with brass piping and steam vents. This is a hole in the earth, raw and gaping. As we step inside, the temperature spikes. It's warm, humid, and smells of ammonia and decay. We have entered a feeding ground. While the Falmer may have been the ones to raid the caravan, they are often just the providers. The consumers are something else entirely. We are in a cave that serves as a nursery and a slaughterhouse for the Chaurus. We move deeper, the light from the entrance fading to a dull grey. The sound of water dripping is replaced by a dry rhythmic skittering sound. Click, clack, click, clack. It's the sound of chitin scraping against stone. We turn a corner and enter a large natural cavern. The floor is covered in a thick white mist, or so it seems at first. Upon closer inspection, we realise it isn't mist. It is webbing. Thick, sticky strands of silk coat the rocks, the floor, and the ceiling. And caught in this web are the leftovers. We find the remains of adventurers, bandits, and unfortunate travellers. But unlike the clean skeletons found in Draugr crypts, these bodies are processed. This brings us to the core in-game fact. The Chaurus are terrifyingly efficient biological machines. In the game, they project a stream of poison that eats through armour and health bars with alarming speed. But the environmental storytelling in this unmarked cave shows us what that poison actually does to organic matter. We see a suit of iron armour, still strapped together, but the person inside is gone. Liquefied. The armour is corroded, pitted with acid burns, lying in a pool of viscous sludge. It implies that the Chaurus don't just bite, they digest their prey externally, melting them down inside their own protection before slurping them up. It is a gruesome, visceral detail that the game engine usually spares us from witnessing directly, but the aftermath is laid out here in horrific detail. In the centre of the room, rising from a pile of bones and egg sacs, is a massive Chaurus Reaper. It is dormant, perhaps sleeping off a meal, its antennae twitching in the stagnant air. Behind it, tending to the eggs like a twisted gardener, is a Hagraven. This combination, Hagraven and Chaurus, is our obscure lore tidbit. Usually we associate Chaurus with the Falmer. They are the farmers' war dogs, their livestock. But finding a Hagraven here suggests a different kind of alliance. The Hagravens are creatures of corrupt nature, humans who have traded their humanity for power, merging with the spirit of the Reach. Their presence in a Chaurus nest implies that they are trading with the Falmer, or perhaps they have learned to domesticate these insects independently. There is a rare book sometimes found in Hagraven nests called Herbin's Bestiary, Hagravens, which notes their affinity for corrupting nature. But the visual story here suggests they are using the Chaurus for their alchemical components. We see tables set up on the side of the cavern, covered in Chorus eggs and harvested chitin. The Hagraven isn't just raising them, she is farming them, and the fertilizer for this farm is the people dragged from the road. The community has a deep-seated phobia of this specific enemy type, and for good reason. A common fan debate revolves around the life cycle of the Chorus and the horrifying implication of the Chorus hunters, the flying variants added in the Dawnguard DLC. Fans theorize that the Chorus we fight on the ground are merely the larval stage. The cocoons we see in these caves, often human-sized, are the subject of intense speculation. Are they transforming Chorus, or are they incubators? There is a disturbing theory that the Chorus use living hosts to incubate their young, similar to parasitic wasps in the real world. The bodies found in the webbing aren't just food, they are nests. When you burst a Chorus egg sac in the game, it makes a wet popping sound. The theory suggests that if you didn't pop it, something would eventually burst out. The Hagraven's presence here adds validity to this. She's likely experimenting with this parasitic relationship, perhaps trying to create a hybrid monstrosity. The atmosphere in this cave is suffocating. The air is thick with spores. The sound of the Hagraven's heavy breathing and the clicking of the insects creates a soundscape of pure nightmare fuel. You feel itchy just standing there. You check your boots to make sure nothing is crawling up your leg. It is a place where humanity has no foothold. We are intruders in a hive. We watch from the shadows as the Hagraven tosses a piece of meat, we don't want to know what kind, to the Reaper. The insect snaps it out of the air with terrifying speed. We realise that we are just calories to them. We are just protein to be melted down. We carefully back out of the chamber. We don't want to start a fight here. The poison spits of the Chorus are deadly, and the Hagraven's fireballs in this enclosed space would be disastrous. We retrace our steps, stepping over the melted armour and the webbing, until we see the light of day again. Bursting out of the cave feels like a rebirth. We gasp in the fresh, cool air of the Reach. We scrub the imaginary bugs off our arms. We need to get away from the biology of the deep. We need open sky. We need the plains. We head southeast, leaving the mountains of the Reach and descending into the vast open tundra of Whiterun Hold. We are heading toward the Sleeping Tree Camp area, a place of strange geography and giant herders. But we aren't going to the camp itself. We are looking for a solitary rock formation nearby, a flat stone table in the middle of the grass. It looks like a picnic spot from a distance. But as we get closer, we see the black candles, we see the body draped over the stone, and we see the man standing over it, who... wait, he's dead too. We are approaching the Necromancer's altar. The vast open tundra of Whiterun Hold stretches out before us, a sea of yellow grass and purple mountain flowers waving in the wind. We are walking west of the city, past the giants herding their mammoths, towards a landmark that looks like it belongs in a different game entirely, the Sleeping Tree. You know the one, the glowing leafless tree that drips purple sap, rumoured to have grown from a spore that fell from a floating island in the novels. It's a strange hallucinogenic corner of the map, but we aren't visiting the tree itself or the giants who guard it. We are looking for something smaller, quieter, and infinitely sadder, located just a short hike to the southwest. Amidst the scrub grass and the rocky outcrops, we find a flat rectangular stone slab. It looks like an ancient altar, perhaps left over from the Dragon Cult era, weathered by centuries of wind and rain. But the scene played out upon it is fresh. It is a tableau of desperation that tells a story the game never explicitly spells out in a quest log. Lying on top of the stone altar is the body of a woman. She is dressed in simple clothes, perhaps a farm girl or a townsperson. Slumped against the base of the altar, as if he collapsed from sheer exhaustion, is a male necromancer. He is dead. She is dead. And between them, the tools of their failed defiance against the natural order are scattered in the grass. This brings us to our core in-game fact. Necromancy in Skyrim is a messy temporary business. When you, the player, use a reanimate corpse spell, the game makes it very clear that you are forcing a spirit back into a broken vessel. The body groans, it moves with a jerky, unnatural gait, and when the spell wears off, the body disintegrates into a pile of ash. It is not true resurrection, it is puppetry. The scene here suggests that this novice necromancer was trying to bypass that limitation. He wasn't trying to create a thrall to carry his burdens or fight bandits. The positioning of the body, laid out respectfully on the altar, not dumped on the ground, suggests he was trying to bring her back. He was trying to restore the person, not just animate the meat. The visual storytelling is heartbreakingly precise. Lying next to the male necromancer's hand is a staff of zombies. This is a crucial detail. In the game mechanics, a staff allows someone with low magicka to cast spells they normally couldn't handle. It implies that this man wasn't a powerful wizard. He wasn't a master of the dark arts with a tower full of secrets. He was likely just a desperate man with no magical talent who bought, stole, or found a tool he thought could save his loved one. He was out of his depth, trying to jumpstart a car with a nuclear reactor. Let's look at the obscure lore tidbit found in the alchemical clutter surrounding the altar. If you look at the ingredients he arranged, often found in a satchel or scattered on the stone, you will typically find nightshade and blue, mountain flowers. Any alchemist worth their salt knows the properties here. Blue mountain flower is a primary ingredient for restore health. Nightshade is used for damage health, or fortified destruction. But in the lore, nightshade is also heavily associated with the transition to the afterlife and preserving the spirit. The combination suggests he was trying to brew a potion or perform a ritual that balanced life and death. He was trying to heal the corpse while binding the spirit. But alchemy in the Elder Scrolls is an exact science, and magic is a volatile force. The presence of the empty wine bottles suggests he might have been drinking to build up the courage, or to numb the pain of what he was about to do. He tried to weave these opposing forces together, the healing and the harming, and the backlash likely killed him instantly. It's a classic Full Metal Alchemist scenario. The law of equivalent exchange took his life, but it wasn't enough to pay for hers. The community has long debated the identity and relationship of these two nameless NPCs. A popular fan theory, often discussed in Hidden Secrets threads, posits that this is a dark mirror to the player's own power. We run around Skyrim shouting people off cliffs and eating dragon souls, treating death as a minor inconvenience that can be fixed with a quick save. This scene serves as a reality check for the setting's inhabitants. For the common folk of Tamriel, death is absolute. The theory suggests that the woman didn't die from the ritual. She was already dead. Maybe she died of illness, maybe a bandit raid. The man, unable to accept it, turned to the only power that promised a reversal: necromancy. But here is the darker twist some fans argue. Did the ritual actually fail, or did it work too well? Some observant players note that the woman's body is fresh. It hasn't turned to ash like a spent thrall. The theory speculates that he succeeded in pulling her soul back, but the cost was his own life force. He poured his own soul into her to jumpstart her heart, dying in the process. But without him there to anchor the spell, she simply died again immediately. Or worse, she is lying there in a catatonic state, a living shell with no mind because the soul transfer was incomplete. It turns the scene from a failed experiment into a tragedy of timing. If he had just had a little more magicka, or a second person to help, it might have worked. The atmosphere on this lonely hill is potent. The sleeping tree glows in the distance, a beacon of alien magic indifferent to the human tragedy in its shadow. The wind whistles through the ribs of the skeleton of a mammoth nearby. It feels quiet here. The frantic energy of combat is gone. There is only the silence of two people who tried to cheat the rules of the game and lost. It's a stark reminder that magic in the Elder Scrolls isn't just a glowing blue bar on your HUD. It is dangerous, unpredictable, and often cruel. It grants power, yes, but it demands a price that most people can't afford to pay. This unnamed necromancer paid it all, and he got nothing in return but a cold stone slab and an unmarked grave in the middle of nowhere. We leave the staff where it lies. It feels tainted, heavy with the bad luck of its previous owner. We step away from the altar, back into the tall grass, and turn our attention to the road again. We need to leave the open plains. The narrative pulls us west, towards the jagged, gold-rich hills of the Reach, specifically the area near Periite's Shrine and the Karth River. We are looking for a lesson in greed. We are heading to a location near the famous Kolskegga mine, the gold capital of Skyrim. But we aren't going to the mine itself, which is usually overrun by Forsworn. We are looking for a spot near the river, under a rocky overhang, where the promise of wealth lured someone into a trap they couldn't spot. The transition from the tragedy of love to the tragedy of avarice is sharp. We move from a man who died for a person to a man who died for a rock. We are trekking through the rocky passes, the sound of the river getting louder, until we spot a strange configuration of boulders near a vein of gold ore. We have arrived at the trap near the mill. We leave the sad, magical silence of the Necromancer's altar and the rolling plains of Whiterun behind. We are heading west again, pushing towards the jagged, unforgiving border of the Reach. The landscape changes abruptly. The soft grass turns to hard, unforgiving granite. The air gets sharper, smelling of crushed stone and river water. We are entering the most vertiginous region of Skyrim, a land of deep canyons and high peaks, where the rivers cut through the earth like scars. We are navigating the area near the Karth River, just south of the famous Kolskegga mine. The sun is high now, bouncing off the quartz in the rocks, creating a blinding glare. We are looking for a small, secluded nook, tucked away under a rocky overhang near the water's edge. It looks like a prospector's dream, a quiet, sheltered spot where the stone glitters with the unmistakable yellow sheen of a gold ore vein. But as we approach, the dream dissolves into a grim punchline about the cost of avarice. We find a skeleton, but we don't see all of him. He's pinned, quite literally flattened, beneath a massive spherical boulder. Only his arm protrudes from the rubble, his bony hand still clutching an iron pickaxe, reaching out toward the gold vein he never got to mine. This is the trap near the mill. It is a scene that looks like it was drawn by a cartoonist with a dark sense of humour, Wile E. Coyote style, but the reality of it in the game world is brutal. Let's talk about the core in-game fact here. Gold is the lifeblood of the Skyrim economy, or at least the grinding economy. Every player knows the drill: get the transmute mineral ore spell, buy iron, turn it to gold, smith jewellery, enchant it, profit. It is the loop that breaks the game economy. Gold ore veins are rare and highly prized. Finding one in the wild usually triggers a dopamine hit. You instinctively reach for your pickaxe button. This unmarked location plays on that exact player psychology. The gold vein is the bait. The trap is a tripwire, hidden cleverly in the brush or disguised by the rocky terrain, connected to a mechanism holding the boulder above. The moment the miner, this poor NPC, stepped forward to claim his prize, he triggered the release. Gravity did the rest. It serves as a meta-commentary on the player's own greed. How many of us, upon seeing this scene, would loot the skeleton, check the chest, if there is one, and then proceed to mine the gold anyway? We are the ones who learn nothing. But let's look closer at the context. This isn't just a random accident. This is a manufactured kill. This brings us to an obscure lore tidbit related to the geopolitical situation of the immediate area. Just up the road is Kolskegga Mine. If you talk to the NPCs Pavo and Gatgroshagak outside the mine, or at the left-hand mine depending on if you cleared it, they tell you they were driven out by the Forsworn. The Forsworn have taken over the main gold supply of the Reach. This suggests that the trap wasn't set by bandits, but by the Forsworn. The Forsworn view the Reach as their ancestral land, and they view the Nords and Imperials as invaders stealing their resources. To them, mining gold isn't just industry, it is theft. It is bleeding the land. By rigging a gold vein with a boulder trap, they aren't just protecting a resource, they are sending a message. They are weaponizing the greed of the civilized races against them. The specific design of the trap, using the natural landscape to crush the intruder, fits the Forsworn aesthetic perfectly. They use nature's wrath, Spriggans, Briarheart's gravity, to fight their wars. The community has had some interesting debates about the physics of this specific trap. A popular fan theory involves the Havoc Engine gods. Players have noted that the boulder traps in Skyrim are notoriously glitchy. Sometimes the rock falls too early, sometimes it floats, sometimes it bounces off the victim's head and kills the person standing behind them. The theory posits that in the lore of the world, these traps are actually magical in nature, or at least cursed. Why does a rope hold a 2-ton rock for years, only to snap the second someone steps on a wire? Fans speculate that the traps are maintained by spirits, or that the tripwires are enchanted with a mild sensory spell to detect intent. It explains why a deer walking past doesn't trigger it, but a man with a pickaxe does. It's a smart trap. Of course, the real answer is game design, but the idea that the dungeon traps of Skyrim are semi-sentient malice engines adds a layer of horror to the exploration. There is also a tragic irony regarding the loot. If you manage to move the boulder, using a shout or by glitching the physics, the skeleton often has very little on him. Maybe a few septims, some rough-spun clothes. He was poor. He likely saw this gold vein as his ticket out of poverty, his chance to buy a house in Markarth or pay off a debt. The gold vein contains 2 or 3 ores, worth maybe 100 gold total if smelted and sold. He died for the price of a few healing potions. It puts the value of life in Skyrim into sharp perspective. The visual composition is striking. The gold vein still glitters. It is permanent. The skeleton is temporary. The rock is eternal. It's a quiet, static representation of the futility of wealth accumulation. You can't take it with you, and sometimes trying to take it is the very thing that sends you to the afterlife. The soundscape here is dominated by the rushing Karth River nearby. It drowns out any other noise. If he screamed when the rock fell, no one heard him. The water just kept flowing, washing away the evidence of his existence, leaving only the bones pinned to the earth. We, being the Dragonborn and lacking any sense of self-preservation, probably mine the gold anyway. We step over the bones, swing our pickaxe and add the ore to our inventory. It feels disrespectful, but we have an iron dagger quota to meet. We leave the flattened prospector to his eternal rest, forever reaching for the payday he never got. We turn away from the river and the gold, looking upward now. We're done with the valleys and the mines. We need elevation. We need to get above the pettiness of gold and traps. We are heading to the roof of the world. The narrative pulls us back toward the central mountains, but not to the throat of the world where Parthenax meditates. We are heading to a lonely peak in the Winterhold Mountains, a place so high that the air is thin and the stars feel close enough to touch. We are looking for a spot that serves no gameplay purpose, has no quest marker, and offers no loot. It is just a place for looking. We are trekking through the deep snow, climbing sheer rock faces until we find a chair, a stone chair built on the edge of a precipice, and sitting in it, eternally watching the sky, is a skeleton. We have arrived at the Skeletal Watcher. We leave the crushed prospector and his fool's gold in the riverbed, turning our backs on the pettiness of material wealth. The narrative arc of our journey demands elevation now. We have crawled through the mud, swum through the freezing sea, and crept through the dark tunnels of the Falmer. It is time to ascend. We are heading to the roof of the world, or at least one of the lonely spires that scratches the belly of the Aetherius. We are trekking into the high peaks of the Winterhold Mountains, specifically the jagged snow-capped range that separates the college from the rest of the world. The climb here is brutal. It's the kind of terrain where you find yourself spamming the jump button, forcing your horse to defy the laws of physics, shimmying up near vertical polygon seams just to see what is at the top. The wind howls differently up here. It isn't the gusty organic wind of the plains. It is a constant high-pitched whistle, a sonic reminder that we're entering a zone hostile to life. We aren't looking for a dragon priest mask or a word wall this time. We are looking for a spot that is completely unmarked, a location that offers no gameplay reward, no achievement, and no loot worth carrying. We are looking for a mood. After cresting a particularly treacherous ridge, somewhere south of Alfstand and north of the Mount Anthor summit, we find it. A small, flat plateau barely wide enough for 2 people. And sitting there, right on the edge of the sheer drop, is a chair made of piled stones. It isn't a throne, it's a recliner, and sitting in it, slumped back in a posture of eternal relaxation, is a skeleton. He is facing north, looking out over the sea of ghosts. If you time your arrival right, if you stand there when the in-game clock hits 10:00 PM and the weather engine clears the clouds, you realise exactly why he sat down. He's watching the Aurora Borealis. This brings us to a core in-game fact that defines the aesthetic legacy of Skyrim. The weather system in this game, specifically the rendering of the night sky, was a technological marvel for 2011 and remains stunning today. The Aurora, often called Kyne's Lights by the Nords, is a dynamic system. It isn't a static skybox. The lights shift, undulate, and bleed colours of green, purple and blue across the stars. For many players, this specific visual is the defining memory of the game. How many of us have stopped in the middle of a quest, ignored a dragon attack, or paused a dungeon crawl just to look up and say, wow, this skeleton is the in-universe representation of that player behaviour. He is the original screenshot hunter. He found the perfect vantage point, the one spot where the light hits the glaciers just right, and he simply refused to leave. The visual storytelling implies a choice. He didn't die of violence. There are no arrows, no enemies nearby, no signs of a struggle. He didn't fall. He sat down. He likely brought a bottle of mead, often found, rolling near his feet, and he waited for the cold to take him. He chose hypothermia as a vehicle for transcendence. Let's dig into the obscure lore tidbit that elevates this from a scenic view to a theological statement. In the Nord tradition, the sky is not just a vacuum. It is the window to Aetherius, the realm of magic and the souls of the dead. The aurora is often poetically described as the bridge to Sovngarde, or the shimmering of the souls of heroes feasting in the Hall of Valor. There is a book, Sovngarde, a re-examination, which discusses the physical connection between the mundus, the mortal plane, and the afterlife. For a Nord, watching the lights isn't just looking at pretty colours, it is looking at heaven. It is looking at the final destination. The skeleton's positioning suggests he wasn't just enjoying the view, he was waiting for his invite. Perhaps he was an old warrior who grew too frail to die in battle, denied his entry to the Hall of Valor by the cruelty of old age, so he climbed the mountain to be as close to the entrance as possible, hoping that if he died watching the lights, Shaw might make an exception and let him in. He died gazing at the party he wasn't invited to. The community has a deep, almost spiritual connection to this specific unmarked location. A popular fan theory posits that this skeleton is a developer tribute. Game worlds are often populated by these little ghosts, avatars of the creators or memorials to team members who passed away during production. Fans speculate that this lone watcher represents the exhaustion and the satisfaction of the development team itself. After building this massive, complex, buggy, beautiful world, they just wanted to sit down and look at it. Another, more existential theory suggests that this character achieved Chim, the Elder Scrolls concept of enlightenment where one realizes they are part of a dream or a video game and can manipulate reality. But instead of becoming a god like Vivek or Talos, this guy realized the futility of it all. He realized he was an NPC. He realized his pathing was scripted, his dialogue was limited, and his existence was for the player's amusement. So, he broke the script. He walked off his patrol route, climbed the mountain, and decided to simply be. He stopped playing the game and started watching the render engine. It's a fourth wall-breaking interpretation that turns the skeleton into a philosopher. The atmosphere up here is thick with isolation. The music that plays in these high peaks, often the track Secunda or The Throat of the World, is sparse, relying on slow strings and ambient wind. It matches the scene perfectly. There is a profound silence to the skeleton. He isn't scary. He isn't grotesque. He looks peaceful. The frost has stripped him clean, and the stars shine through his ribcage. He has become part of the mountain. It forces the player to pause. In a game designed around constant movement, go here, kill this, fetch that, level up. This skeleton is a monument to stillness. He challenges you to stop running. He challenges you to sit in the empty space beside him, and yes, the rock is flat enough for your character to stand there and just watch the sky for a full minute. It's a test of patience. Can you, the dopamine-addicted player, handle doing nothing? Can you appreciate the beauty of the virtual world without interacting with it? Most of us can't. We look, we take a screenshot, we maybe loot the mead, and we sprint away, Skyrim hopping down the cliffside to the next quest marker. We leave him there, the eternal guardian of the view. He doesn't mind, he has nowhere else to be. The contrast between his stillness and the shifting lights above is the final piece of visual poetry in this section. The world keeps turning, the moons Massa and Secunda continue their orbit, the civil war rages below, dragons burn villages, and through it all the Watcher watches. He is the one constant in a chaotic universe. He represents the permanence of death in the face of the fleeting nature of life and dynamic weather patterns. We linger for a moment, letting the stamina bar regenerate, watching the green ribbons of light dance over the College of Winterhold far below. It feels like a good place to end a journey, but we have one last story to tell. We have one last ghost to chase. The Watcher is static, fixed to his mountain. Our final subject is the opposite. He is kinetic. He is restless. He is the most famous unmarked mystery in the game, a figure who travels the roads we have walked all night. We turn away from the peace of the summit and descend. We slide down the slopes, leaving the snow for the mist of the central tundra. We are heading to the roads near Whiterun, specifically the path that leads to Hamvir's Rest. We need to wait for nightfall again. We need to listen for the sound of hooves that don't touch the ground. We are going to find the Headless Rider. We descend from the frozen silence of the Skeletal Watcher's peak, sliding down the shale and snow until our boots hit the hard-packed dirt of the Whiterun plains. We have spent the night visiting the stagnant, the trapped, and the dead in place. We have seen bodies pinned by rocks, frozen in ice, and charred by fire. But for our final stop, we are looking for something that refuses to sit still. We are looking for the most kinetic, elusive ghost story in the province. The night is deep now. Secunda is low in the sky, casting those long, eerie shadows that make every bush look like a troll. The music has shifted to that quiet, ambient string section that plays when you're just wandering the roads, safe but solitary. We are standing near the crossroads west of Whiterun, perhaps near the western watchtower or the road leading to Rorikstead. We are waiting, and then we hear it. Not the roar of a dragon or the grunt of a bear, but the rhythmic, thunderous beating of hooves. It gets louder, faster, approaching with the speed of a train. A blue light washes over the road, drowning out the torchlight, and he rushes past us. This is the Headless Horseman. He's a spectral figure, clad in ancient steel plate, riding a ghostly horse that is more spirit than flesh, and true to his name, he has no head. Where his neck ends, there is only a stump of glowing ectoplasm. He doesn't stop for us. He doesn't attack. He doesn't offer a quest. He just rides, galloping with a singular, desperate purpose across the map. This brings us to the core in-game fact. The Headless Horseman is one of the game's most famous Easter egg encounters, but he's also a fully functional NPC with a schedule and a destination. He spawns between 10 Hylar PM and 4 Send AM, and unlike most random encounters that spawn, do a thing, and despawn, the horseman travels. If you have a fast horse, Shadowmere or Arvak, you can catch him. You can ride alongside him. It becomes a chase, a race through the night. He ignores the wolves snapping at his horse's heels. He ignores the bandits shooting arrows from the roadside forts. He cuts through the landscape, phasing through obstacles, leading you on a winding path that cuts across the entirety of Whiterun Hold. If you manage to keep up with him, if you have the stamina and the patience to follow this spectral courier to the end of his line, he will lead you to a specific location. Hamvir's Rest. Hamvir's Rest is an ancient Nordic tomb located northwest of Whiterun, tucked in the shadow of the mountains near Dustman's Cairn. It's a small, open-air graveyard filled with Draugr and skeletons. When the horseman arrives here, he doesn't deliver a monologue. He doesn't grant you a wish. He simply rides into the centre of the graveyard and vanishes. He dissolves into the night, his journey complete for another evening. Let's unpack the obscure lore tidbit that the community has attached to this rider. The game labels him simply as a Headless Horseman, but if you spend any time in the taverns of Skyrim, from the Winking Skeever in Solitude to the Bannered Mare in Whiterun, you have heard the bards sing a very specific song. You know the one, Ragnar the Red. There once was a hero named Ragnar the Red, who came riding to Whiterun from Old Rorikstead. The lyrics tell the story of a braggart warrior who rode into town, boasted of his prowess, and met his match in the shield maiden Matilda. The song ends with a very graphic description of his death, and the braggart named Ragnar was boastful no more when his ugly red head rolled around on the floor. The connection is almost too perfect to be accidental. We have a ghost riding a horse. The song mentions riding from Rorikstead to Whiterun. The horseman is often found on the road between Rorikstead and Whiterun. The song explicitly states he was decapitated. The ghost is headless. For the vast majority of the lore community, this isn't even a theory anymore. It is accepted canon. The Headless Horseman is Ragnar the Red, doomed to eternally ride the road between his home and the place of his death, searching for the head that Matilda severed so many years ago. It adds a tragic lyrical quality to the encounter. When you see him, you aren't just seeing a ghost, you're seeing the protagonist of the most annoying song in the game. He isn't a monster, he's a folklore legend made manifest. He is the guy who talked trash and got wrecked, and now he can't find peace. However, this leads to a fascinating fan theory and community debate regarding his destination. If he is Ragnar the Red, why does he go to Hamvir's Rest? Why doesn't he go to Whiterun, where he died? Or Rorikstead, where he was from? The location is called Hamvir's Rest, not Ragnar's Rest. This discrepancy splits the theorists. Some argue that Ragnar is buried there, perhaps in a pauper's grave or an unmarked plot within Hamvir's family tomb. Maybe Matilda killed him, and dumped the body in the nearest crypt. Others argue that the horseman is Hamvir. But who is Hamvir? The game never tells us. There is no book titled The Life of Hamvir. He's a name on a map marker, nothing more. This has led to the theory that the horseman is actually a generic representation of the Old Nord heroes, a chaotic spirit of the ancient world that doesn't fit into the modern era. The fact that he leads you to a graveyard filled with Draugr suggests he is a guardian of the dead, checking in on his dusty brethren before the sun rises. The irony of the loot at Hamvir's Rest provides a final dark chuckle. If you follow the horseman all the way to the graveyard, fight off the skeletons and the Draugr that guard the master-level chest in the centre, you will often find a specific item of random loot. It isn't guaranteed, but the loot tables have a high chance of spawning a helmet. Specifically, an iron or steel helmet. Think about it. The Headless Horseman leads you to a grave containing a helmet. He is leading you to the one thing he needs but can never wear. It's a cosmic joke. He is trying to get his head back, or at least a replacement, but he lacks the hands to pick it up or the head to put it on. He shows you the treasure, watches you take it, and fades away. It's a moment of profound futility. The atmosphere of the chase is unlike anything else in the game. Most of Skyrim is about combat or exploration. Following the horseman is about witnessing. You're a passive observer to his routine. The blue glow of his steed lights up the trees as he passes, creating a strobe light effect in the forest. The sound of the hooves is hypnotic. It draws you in. You find yourself ignoring the fast travel button, ignoring the quest markers, just to see where he goes. And when he vanishes at the graveyard, leaving you alone in the dark with a bunch of angry skeletons, the silence that follows is heavy. The magic is gone. You are just a grave robber again. The horseman was a glimpse into the layer of reality that exists beneath the civil war and the dragons, the layer of myths, songs and regrets that refuse to fade. He is the perfect final entry for our tour because he embodies the spirit of the unmarked story. He is a story that moves. He's a story you have to catch. He's a story that doesn't care if you're there or not. He will ride tomorrow night, and the night after that, and the night after that, regardless of whether you save the world or burn it down. We stand at Hamvir's Rest, the first light of dawn beginning to bleed purple over the throat of the world. The Draugr are dead, again. The chest is looted. The horseman is gone. The world of Skyrim is waking up. The guards are spawning in the cities. The merchants are unlocking their doors. But we have seen what happens in the dark. We have seen the tragedies, the accidents, and the ghosts that populate the silence. And there we have it. Loremasters. 15 stories. 15 quiet, unmarked tragedies scattered across the map like breadcrumbs of sorrow. We have travelled from the charred coast of the college to the crushed cabin on the river. We have stood with the Mourning Giant in the steam, sat with the Skeletal Watcher on the peak, and raced the Headless Rider through the night. We've seen that in the Elder Scrolls. The most powerful storytelling isn't always found in the main quest. It isn't in the dialogue of the Jarls or the shouts of the dragons. It is found in the silence. It is found in the placement of a skeleton, the contents of a journal, or the way a giant looks at a dead mammoth. These are the stories that make the world feel lived in, aged, and unapologetically cruel. They remind us that while we are the protagonist, the centre of the universe, the world around us is filled with people who lived, loved, failed, and died long before we ever woke up in that cart. So, as the sun rises over Tamriel and the shadows retreat, to the corners of the map, it is time for us to end our patrol. You have walked a long road tonight. You have carried the weight of these forgotten souls. Now, it is time to put the controller down. It is time to let the stamina bar refill. Let the music fade out. Let the fire in the hearth burn down to embers. The dragons can wait until tomorrow. The civil war isn't going anywhere. For now, just listen to the wind outside your window and let the quiet of the north settle over you. Sweet dreams.